The gate had barely finished drying when she showed up, arms crossed, sunglasses too big for her face, and a stack of papers clutched like a badge of authority. Karen, HOA president, self-appointed sheriff of paint swatches and community aesthetics. She didn't even bother with a hello, just pointed at the gate, my gate, and said, "That color is not in compliance with our visual standards." I was sitting in the cab of my tractor at the time, engine still running, front loader raised halfway, because I just finished moving gravel. I stared at her through the windshield for a moment, trying to figure out if she was serious. She was. "This gate may look like just another coat of paint," I said slowly, stepping down, "but it's not what you think. It's not HOA land. It's my property. My rules." Karen didn't care. She waved her violation notice in the air like she was serving a warrant. "You'll repaint it by the end of the week or face a fine of." I climbed back into the tractor, shifted into gear. She didn't move. She planted herself right in front of me, hand on hip, shouting something about uniformity and curb appeal. I gently tapped the throttle. The front loader dipped just low enough for the bucket to groan against the dirt and crawl forward, 1 foot, then 2, until it hovered less than a foot from the chrome bumper of her Lexus. She went pale. I didn't say a word, just smiled, because she hadn't expected the tractor to move forward, and she definitely hadn't expected what would come next. If I didn't stop her here, it wouldn't just be about the gate. It would be about everything, because once they think they can control your color choices, they'll come for the rest of your land next. This wasn't just about paint. It was about power. Karen wasn't upset because the gate was red. She was upset because she didn't choose it. And if she could force me to repaint something on the edge of my own ranch, what was next? The barn siding? My mailbox? The color of my livestock trailer? The gate sat 3 feet inside my property line, past the easement, beyond her authority. But that didn't stop her. In her mind, visibility meant ownership. If she could see it from the street, she thought she could regulate it. And when I refused to cave, she escalated fast. She threatened fines, $1,000, then 2, threatened to file a complaint with the county, claimed I was diminishing the visual harmony of the subdivision. She even muttered something about depreciating property values. That was the moment I realized she wasn't bluffing. She was laying groundwork for legal harassment. And the worst part? I knew how these things spread. One complaint turns into a bylaw rewrite. One bogus fine turns into a lien. One neighbor folds, then another. Before long, people forget they even own the land their house sits on. That's what was really at stake. Not just a red gate, but the line between living on your land and asking permission to exist on it. And I wasn't about to let that line get blurred. Not for anyone. Especially not for her. That I didn't paint the gate red to make a statement. I painted it red because that's what my grandfather did, and his father before him. It wasn't about aesthetics or curb appeal or whatever other nonsense Karen tries to legislate with her laminated bylaws. It was about identity, family, legacy. Red meant welcome. Red meant strength. Red meant we're home. The original Thorn Ranch gate sat 4 counties east, where the plains start to roll into foothills. My great-grandfather carved it out of black oak and welded the hinges himself in the dead of winter. He painted it red because it was the only color left at the hardware store that didn't cost more than a day's wage. But it stuck, and it became ours. That same gate held through storms, drought, and wind so strong it could carry a man's hat into the next town. When it finally rotted out, they replaced it with steel. Still red. Always red. So when I moved out here, after years of saving, working every odd job a man can find, I didn't build a house first. I built a gate. 45 acres of untamed land. A parcel just outside of city limits, past the jurisdiction of traffic lights and leaf blower noise complaints. No house. No deraigua. Just wild space waiting to be shaped. I cleared the brush myself, 1 fence post at a time, then laid in the gravel road. It was months before I poured the slab for the cabin. But the gate? That came early. The moment I put up the perimeter fence, I welded the frame together, bolted it to 2 cedar posts, and painted it red. Bright, crimson, unapologetic. That red gate was the first thing that felt real after years of living paycheck to paycheck in shared rentals and shoebox apartments. It stood as proof I had finally built something I could call mine. Life on the land was simple. That's how I liked it. I rose with the sun, worked by hand, and slept like stone. Some days were hard. Most were honest. I raised chickens, kept bees, ran a modest greenhouse operation that kept me fed and kept the local farmer's market in heirloom tomatoes most of the year. I never caused trouble, didn't blast music, didn't host wild parties. I mowed my field, paid my taxes, and minded my own damn business. And the land? It rewarded that. It gave back peace, focus, breath. For 3 years, I didn't hear a single complaint. No letters, no knocks. The nearest neighbor was down a dirt road, separated by 2 pastures and a creek. If anyone noticed the red gate, they either liked it or had enough sense to keep their opinions to themselves. That changed when the subdivision came in. It started small like it always does. A proposed development sign on the old cattle pasture across the road. Rumors of a gated community. Some builder with a name like Copper Ridge Estates or Golden Summit Trails. Nothing too threatening at first. Just whispers of sidewalks and cul-de-sacs and people who wanted rural living with modern convenience. Whatever that means. Then came the construction crews. The concrete. The power lines. The HOA. They called it Meadowbrook Hills. Funny name. There's no meadow. And the only hill is the landfill they paved over in 2014. I ignored it at first. Most of it was on the far side of the ridge, buffered by trees and topography. I figured if they wanted to live in matchbox houses and argue over mailbox height, let them. I keep living how I always had. But Karen had other plans. She didn't move in right away. She showed up after Phase 2, the expansion that pushed the development closer to the gravel access road that cut past my front gate. Suddenly, I went from having no neighbors to having 100. All of them wrapped in fresh beige siding and stamped concrete driveways. That's when the first letter showed up. Dear property owner, as the Meadowbrook Hills HOA board, we are dedicated to maintaining the aesthetic integrity of our community. We recently observed a non-compliant structure visible from the community perimeter that does not adhere to the standard design guidelines. Specifically, color violation, non-earth tone gate, unauthorized fencing materials, welded iron without HOA approval, lack of landscaping to buffer visual impact from public access road. Please respond within 10 business days to avoid further action. Best, Karen Whitmore, President, Meadowbrook Hills HOA. I read the letter twice. Then I read it again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining things. And then I laughed. I set the letter down on the workbench, grabbed a Sharpie, and wrote 3 words across the bottom in thick black ink. Not in your jurisdiction. Folded it. Walked it to the mailbox. Flag up. The next week, I got a second letter. Same format. This time, with a friendly reminder and a threat of escalation. That's when I realized she wasn't just being nosy. She was being territorial. She believed she had authority. She believed visibility gave her rights. That proximity was permission. She didn't care that my land was never annexed, that my property lines were drawn before her subdivision ever broke ground, that the gravel road wasn't owned or maintained by the HOA, that I had legal proof and historical maps. She saw a gate she didn't approve of and declared war. I tried to de-escalate. I really did. I sent her a printout of the county records showing the legal parcel boundaries, highlighted in yellow, with my name circled and the HOA's footprint nowhere in sight. I even dropped by one of their open board meetings, sat quietly in the back, listened to 30 minutes of budget complaints and sprinkler repair disputes before politely asking if I could speak. I introduced myself, explained the gate, explained the history, the family meaning, the law. Karen blinked, smiled tightly, nodded like she understood, then issued another notice 3 days later. This one came with photographs of my gate, taken from her car, with a timestamp and a summary accusing me of refusing to comply with community expectations. That's when I stopped being nice, because at that point, it wasn't about confusion. It was about control. So when the day came that I was out in the field, tractor idling, and saw her Lexus pull up again, I already knew the game. She marched up with her usual stack of papers, full of hollow legalese and empty threats. pointed to the gate like it had personally offended her sense of style, and began reading a prepared statement about community standards. I let her talk, let her point, let her list off paint codes and HOA color palettes and something about visual harmony. Then I stepped into the cab of the tractor, shifted into gear, and rolled forward, slow, steady, until the loader was a whisper from her front bumper. Her mouth snapped shut, and for the first time since this all began, I saw what I hadn't before. She wasn't protecting anything. She was just used to getting her way. I was halfway through grading the road that ran along my south field when I saw her car again. Same silver Lexus. Same glare through the windshield. She parked just outside the fence line this time. Close enough to be seen, far enough to pretend she wasn't trespassing. It was the fourth time that week. And unlike the other visits, she didn't step out right away. She just sat there, watching, taking notes, maybe. It was hard to tell from a distance, but every time I turned the tractor, I caught her silhouette, always facing the gate. That gate had become an obsession. To her, it wasn't red paint anymore. It was defiance, a crack in the polished control she'd spent years cultivating. She couldn't allow it, not in her neighborhood, even if it wasn't legally hers. 10 minutes passed before she finally opened the car door and stepped onto the gravel. She had papers in one hand and her phone in the other, already recording. She marched right up to the gate and pointed at it like she was calling out a war crime. This gate is out of compliance with Meadowbrook Hills Design Rule 5.2. Structures visible from shared roads must be painted in approved neutral tones. I shut off the tractor, wiped the sweat from my brow. Karen, I said, this isn't a shared road. It's on private land. The gate is mine. The paint is mine. And your HOA doesn't extend a single inch past that cattle guard. She ignored me, walked a few feet along the fence line, crouched, and began taking photos, close-ups of the hinges, the post caps, the rust spots on the gravel near the edge of my property. What are you doing? I asked. Documenting violation evidence, she replied. You've been warned multiple times. You've refused to comply. This documentation will support our petition for municipal code enforcement. Municipal code. I blinked. You mean the county that already ruled this land is exempt from HOA oversight? That ruling isn't final, she snapped. We're appealing. I laughed once quietly. Good luck with that. Then she did something I didn't expect. She stepped directly in front of the tractor, planted herself like a human roadblock, arms folded, chin up. You will not start this vehicle until this matter is resolved. I sat back in a seat, stunned. You're blocking machinery now? I'm preventing further damage, she replied. You're using this vehicle to intimidate. This is harassment. That's when I realized she was filming again. Her phone aimed squarely at my face. I stayed still. No sudden movements. No words. Then, slowly, I turned the ignition off, climbed out of the cab, and reached into the side compartment of the tractor. I pulled out a folder, copies of county land maps, zoning boundaries, and HOA jurisdiction limits. I kept it close ever since she started her campaign. And this time, I handed it to her. Read this, then get off my property. She didn't even glance at the papers, just sneered and tossed them onto the gravel. Then she pulled out her phone and began making calls. I need board presence at the south boundary line immediately, she said into the speaker. The subject is escalating again. I'm invoking visual compliance review. Visual compliance review? When the HOA hell was that? I watched as she paced up and down the shoulder of the gravel road, barking orders like a general. 10 minutes later, a second car pulled up, then a third. By the time the sun dipped behind the pine line, there were 4 HOA board members standing just outside my fence, pointing, gesturing, and muttering over clipboards. One of them even brought a color swatch booklet. I couldn't make this up if I tried. They stood in a semicircle like they were evaluating an alien object, holding up their little squares of approved earth tones against my gate like a bunch of suburban shamans trying to ward off evil spirits. Then Karen turned back to me. We're issuing a formal compliance directive, she declared. You have 48 hours to repaint the gate in accordance with HOA standards. If you refuse, we will file with the county magistrate and begin legal action. And until then, this property will be monitored for additional violations. I walked to the gate, unlatched it, and swung it open wide. Karen flinched like I'd just drawn a weapon. "You're free to leave," I said flatly, "unless you'd like me to file a trespassing report first." She hesitated. The others looked uneasy. One of the board members, a guy I vaguely recognized from the development entrance, shifted nervously. "Karen, maybe we should go. This is getting weird." "We have jurisdiction," she hissed. "We voted. This color lowers property value. It violates architectural integrity." I stepped forward, just enough to make her back up slightly. "You can wave your rules around all you want," I said, "but this gate isn't under your control. You don't get to redefine borders because you don't like what's on the other side." She scowled. "You'll regret this." And then, for the second time that month, she drove off in a storm of dust and entitlement. But this time, she left something behind. The next morning, I found a small laminated sign zip-tied to my fence line. It read, "Warning, unapproved structure ahead. Pending architectural review. HOA action required." She was treating my land like it was under construction in her subdivision. That was the final straw. I called my lawyer. He laughed when he read the sign. "She's out of her mind," he said. "You want to send a cease and desist?" "No," I said. "I want to bury them in paper. County filings. Date confirmations. A full report to the zoning board." He whistled. "You want to go to war?" "No," I said again calmly. "I want to make sure they know whose land they're standing on before they bring another paint swatch within 100 feet of it." I gave them more than enough rope. While Karen and her clipboard posse played HOA commando over a gate that wasn't their business, I kept my mouth shut and my records airtight. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I let them hang themselves with paperwork. And oh, did they oblige. See, I wasn't just sitting idle after that last standoff. I knew Karen was escalating. You don't bring backup, color charts, and laminated warning signs unless you're building a case, or at least pretending to. And if she was planning to file anything with the county, I needed to be ready. So I started digging. The first thing I pulled was my deed. Again, I'd already shown it to Karen once, but this time I went deeper. I got the original survey, pulled archived plat maps, and requested zoning document from the county assessor's office. Everything was crystal clear. My property was outside Meadowbrook Hills. The road she claimed as shared was marked private and recorded as part of my parcel. The HOA boundaries ended more than 200 feet away from my gate. It wasn't just obvious. It was legal gospel. Still, something wasn't sitting right. Karen had mentioned filing a visual compliance violation with the magistrate, and the way she kept throwing around legal terms told me she wasn't acting alone. She had help, or at least support from the HOA board. So I requested public copies of any formal complaints filed by Meadowbrook Hills against my property. 3 days later, the records came back. There were 4, all signed by K. Whitmore, all full of lies. Violation 1. Unapproved gate structure constructed in shared visual corridor. Violation 2. Use of heavy equipment on community easement during sensitive hours. Violation 3. Visual pollution, non-standard color palette. Violation 4. Refusal to comply with repeated architectural review requests. Each complaint referenced a non-existent HOA clause, claimed shared ownership of my fence line, and attached photographic evidence. Blurry photos, clearly taken from a vehicle parked on a public road, zoomed in so far you could count pixels. But here's the kicker. One of the complaints included an invoice from a private inspection firm. $475 billed to Meadowbrook Hills, HOA for fence line and gate color evaluation. The firm? A landscaping contractor with no architectural license. Registered to Karen's nephew. That was it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just overreach. This was fraud. I sent everything to Lucas, my lawyer. The guy's a bulldog in court, but he has the patience of a farmer when it comes to building a case. I laid it all out. The false complaints, the invoice, the HOA bylaws, the color swatch insanity. He went silent for a long time as he read. Then he said, "You want to end this?" I said, "I want her off my land, off my name, and off that HOA board. Then we go big." He drafted a cease and desist order and filed it with the county clerk. At the same time, we filed a complaint for harassment, property interference, and libel based on the fabricated filings. But that wasn't all. Lucas also filed a request with the HOA's insurance provider, alerting them to possible embezzlement and personal gain through unauthorized use of association funds. Karen had weaponized her position to pay a family member for inspections on land she didn't control. It wasn't just wrong, it was actionable. The board meeting was held that Friday evening. Karen thought she was about to present her compliance update on my gate. What she didn't know was that Lucas had sent copies of every legal filing to the rest of the board in advance, along with a brief summary titled, "Documented Overreach and Financial Misconduct by Current HOA President." I didn't go in. I didn't have to, but I did position my tractor about 20 yards from the clubhouse, just in case. The meeting didn't last long. Witnesses said Karen showed up in full regalia, clipboard, folder, 3-inch binder of evidence. She started speaking, made it about 5 minutes into her usual jargon. Then one of the board members, a guy named Alton, stood up and read Lucas's letter out loud. Karen turned red, tried to interrupt, said it was a distraction campaign. Alton didn't budge. Then another board member, Jessica, asked if she had receipts for the inspection charge. Karen tried to deflect, claimed it was approved verbally. "That's not how budgets work," someone muttered. Voices rose. Papers were flipped. Karen stormed out 15 minutes later, shaking, furious, red-faced, straight toward her car, right past my tractor. She didn't even see me at first. She opened her door, tossed her folder inside, turned, and froze. Because I was there, engine idling, front loader up, and ever so slowly, I eased the tractor forward, 1 inch, then 2, until the very edge of the steel bucket hovered an inch from her front bumper. I didn't say a word. She backed away like I was holding a live wire. "This is harassment," she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't touch a thing. She looked back at her car, back at me, and then she did something I'll never forget. She got in, slammed the door, and peeled off, dust rising behind her like smoke. That was the last time I saw her in person. 2 weeks later, the HOA board voted to suspend her indefinitely. A third-party auditor was brought in to review the association's books. Residents were notified. Budgets were opened for the first time in years. And every single one of those phony complaints she filed, withdrawn, officially, publicly, with apology letters. The red gate stayed, untouched, unchallenged, unforgettable. A new HOA president was appointed, someone quieter, less theatrical. I met him once. He brought muffins, apologized for the past, and promised they'd respect boundary lines moving forward. I nodded. We didn't need to be friends, just neighbors who knew when to mind their own business. The laminated warning sign was gone, too. I replaced it with a new one. Just 2 words, "Keep moving." And beneath it, in smaller print, "Private property, tractor crossing ahead." Because some lines don't need to be crossed. They just need to be seen. The gate stayed red. It didn't get painted over. It didn't get replaced. It didn't get moved or hidden behind hedges. It stood, same as always, bright, bold, and completely legal. And this time, nobody dared to challenge it. The audit in Meadowbrook Hills, HOA dragged on for a few months. Turned out, Karen's little side projects, like hiring her nephew's landscaping company for visual inspections or ordering HOA-branded cones and signs without approval, were just the tip of the iceberg. There were discrepancies in maintenance expenses, unexplained legal consultations, and a suspicious number of community improvements billed to lots that didn't exist yet. By the end of it, the board didn't just suspend her. They quietly suggested she resign, which she did, in a single-sentence email with no salutation. She listed her house for sale 3 days later, and by the time the "for sale" sign hit the lawn, most of her neighbors had already heard the story. Some even drove by the ranch just to see the gate. A few of them stopped to talk. They didn't apologize exactly, but the tone was different, humbler, more respectful. They asked about the gate color, about the history, about the property lines they had once assumed didn't matter. One guy, a new resident named Marcus, said it best. "You kept it red. That's kind of badass." I didn't say much in response. I didn't need to. The gate spoke loud enough on its own. Things settled after that. No more letters. No more visits. The HOA held elections, restructured its rules, and put in a clause clarifying, finally and formally, that it had no jurisdiction beyond its actual border. And me? I kept living the way I always had. Morning started with coffee and gravel under my boots. Chickens clucking, bees humming. The lower the tractor as I made my rounds. The work didn't change. The sky didn't change. But the air felt lighter, like something false had finally been scraped off the surface of things. There's a quiet power in standing your ground. Not yelling, not threatening, just planting your feet in the soil and saying, no. That's what the red gate became, a line in the dirt that didn't need to shout. Just stand. It wasn't about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was about knowing what's yours, protecting it, respecting it, and never handing over control to someone with a clipboard and a title they gave themselves. Karen never understood that. She thought authority was about noise, about compliance, about rules you could bend as long as you wore enough perfume and spoke in the right tone. But property doesn't care about tone. It cares about deeds, boundaries, facts. It remembers who paid for it, who worked it, who welded the hinges and drove the posts and painted the damn gate. And once the law sided with me, and the neighborhood saw it for what it was, something changed in more than just a ranch. The gate stopped being just my symbol. It became theirs too. Last month, someone from the HOA drove by and took a photo. Not for evidence, but for the new community bulletin board. They're putting together a history display about the character of Meadowbrook Hills and surrounding properties. The red gate is on the cover. I shook my head when they told me. Couldn't decide whether to laugh or just nod. Maybe both. But I didn't say no, because maybe that's how things change. 1 inch at a time, like a tractor moving forward. Morai? Here it is. Pay might fade, but property lines don't. And the law doesn't care if your HOA disapproves of the color. So if someone tells you to shrink yourself, to dilute your roots, to repaint your legacy, so it matches their idea of what's acceptable, don't. Keep it red, and keep it yours.